Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
I'm Eliot.
And we are back again this day.
We are.
And we're going to be just announcing the obvious over and over again.
You know what I noticed? I noticed that I will take my cue and tone from how you start. So if you go, I'm Jodi, I'll go, I'm Eliot. But if you go, I'm Jodi, then I'll answer in kind.
Eliot.
I'm Eliot. Yes.
Well, interestingly, and right after you say I'm Eliot, then I know it comes back to me, but sometimes I'm like, I don't even, what was I going to say next? Which is why I say things like, and we're back.
And we're back.
Like, I'm surprised we're recording. Anyway,
Yes.
Okay. Well, now that we've drugged people through that.
Yeah. Well, that was
On the off chance this is your first episode you've ever listened to.
Yeah, this is pretty much this is our A game, actually.
That's disappointing. Anyway. Okay, a couple quick notes before we get started. So we've been mentioning the community, the Facebook group that we are launching. It is all set up. It's kind of like the party that like the drinks are laid out. No one's really arriving yet. We're hoping people start arriving soon, but it is ready. We are there, and we've decided to make it a little bit easier to find, and then I'll tell you why. You can actually use the URL. It's a bit.ly. If you're not familiar with that, it's just bit.ly/SHMS group. So here's my story group, SHMS group. If you do that, it'll take you directly to the group. And the reason that's important today is we have a poll there because we want your opinion. So here's the deal. We are contemplating, and we would love for you to weigh in because it's not a small amount of work, but we're trying to decide if it's worth it. So we are contemplating videoing. How do you say that?
Well, see, I say videotaping, but that makes me seem really old.
That does make you seem really old.
Maybe just recording. Is there video record? Well, we already record.
Yeah.
Video recording. We're going to take moving pictures of our podcast.
Yes, we are considering adding video to the output of the podcast and have it not just be audio. But we're curious if that has any interest to anyone. So we have a very quick, literally a one-click poll there, and it would do us such helpfulness. My God,
do us such a service
today.
Let's say it that way. Yeah,
I'll just mime things, and then you put words.
That would be great, and that's where the video would come in.
Yes, you could see the looks of panic we give each other. Sometimes we're like, I've lost my train of thought. Where are we? So anyway, but this does have implications because I would then have to do my hair more often if we are going to do videos. So this is why it's important. We would.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether I get into the fact that I have to do my hair.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
You're good. I think you're good. Now, let us know if that has any interest to you or not before we, because we want to use our efforts where they will be most appreciated. So hop on into the bit.ly/SHMS group. It's so funny. We did that so that it'd be simpler, but because I have to spell it all, it doesn't sound simple. bit.ly.SHMS group. Or just go to Facebook and search for us. But
that's the first thing we wanted to talk about. The second thing is we're going to continue to give shout outs to Arkansas.
Even though we're getting no Arkansas love.
We're getting no Arkansas love, but we're going to continue. Well, I said shout outs. What I mean is we're going to continue to badger Arkansas.
Well, and actually, since no one's there listening to us, we're really badgering you about Arkansas. So if until we get an Arkansas listener, we're going to mention it every single time.
Yes, and maybe some of our loyal listeners in states that border Arkansas
could just drive over. Could call their neighbors who might live across the state line. Call a neighbor, have them sign up just so that we can stop focusing on this. And if you're just joining us, the deal with Arkansas is that while we're in well over 50 countries, we are in 49 of our 50 states, and it's driving us crazy.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I will say we do record sometimes a little in advance, so it is possible that we will continue to harp on getting Arkansas an episode or two after we get an Arkansas listener. But as of this date, we do not have an Arkansas listener, and it's driving us crazy.
And I will also say this: if we get an Arkansas download and somebody goes into our Facebook group and says they have an Arkansas download, we will send them So Here's My Story whiskey glass.
Yes, and mention them on the next podcast.
Yes, we will.
Absolutely. Although that might be a deterrent for some people.
Right, well.
Don't mention me. All right, so we need everyone's help in getting an Arkansas listener so we can take it off our mental swim lane list.
Yes.
Okay. We want to mention our sponsors so we can get on to the interesting stuff.
I do. I thought Arkansas was interesting, but that's
like
okay.
5 minutes. Of,
right.
Random.
So want to thank Tom Loveland and Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, and Mary Craft Staffing and HR Solutions. Thank you so much as always.
I believe you have a story, right?
I do have a story, and it's not so much a story as it is a situation, but I will start in the traditional sense. So here's my story. As our loyal listeners know, we are broadcasting from the So Here's My Story headquarters in Maryland, and it's cold and it's gray and
unseasonably cold.
Unseasonably cold.
Yeah, it's not usually this cold here.
Yeah, and it's just, well, it's winter, and I, like a lot of people, are affected by not just the climate, but the fact that I'm still in what I feel like is the middle of my afternoon, and I look out and it's dark.
Yeah.
And
because cold and sunny is really different than cold and drab dreary.
It is. Yeah. It is. And, watching your step as you walk to your car because there's still ice on the ground and you can hear the crunch of the salt sometimes. And sometimes at this time of year, when the Christmas lights on the street come down, and I realize it's a long, hard slog to the next holiday or whatever it is, whether it's a summer vacation or whether it's just the Memorial Day weekend. This is the time for me that it's hardest mentally to be up. And so I've made it a point in the past couple years to say, well, this is the time that I'm going to focus particularly on arranging coffees, or I won't say meetings, because meetings seems formal, like I'm having a meeting with a client, I'm having a meeting with a referral source or a prospect. I don't mean that kind of meeting. I mean get-togethers or coffees. Connect.
Like you want to connect.
I do. Yeah. I want to connect with the people in my circle, on my list, however you want to say it, who I think of as just real additions in my life. And a lot of times they are clients, or they are people that I'd love to work with or envision working with at some point. But that's not the agenda. I have received
calls from you.
Yes, you have.
I'm smiling. I'm like, oh yeah, that's why Elliot's like, hey, can we have lunch?
That's exactly right. You have. And because
you didn't say that, but now I know those used to be like, I'm wintered down.
That's right. And so it's my way of connecting with my points of light. And I've talked to a number of people about this. And in fact, I was out for coffee with one of the people on my list. And he said, it's weird. We get together every once in a while, but I've learned that somewhere around February, we always get together. Why is that? I said, okay, well, it's kind of a weird thing to say, but this is why.
That's so interesting. So I am super familiar with the origin of what you do, like the feeling that you're having that the calling the people and the making the connections is your solution to.
Yeah.
I have those issues. I talk to clients and friends and colleagues all the time who are feeling that. That solution to it is a new one to me. I've never thought of that being the thing that I do to make it better. So I want to come back to that part in a second, but I don't want to miss over the origin part of it, because it's so interesting to me. I've been thinking about this topic a lot, so it's funny that you brought it up. But part of what has, especially given your solution to it, it's going to sound really interesting. When I have connected about this way that January often feels with other people, everyone always has this like shocking, like, oh, I've been feeling that way too. It's interesting to me that it also creates this sense of like isolation, that like I'm the only one feeling this way. There must be something wrong with me. Am I? Because the conversations I've had with people have come up when they're saying, I'm going to go see a doctor. I'm going to go to acupuncture. I'm going to try this new thing because I just feel, and they fill in the blank with their description that is somehow always cold and isolated and cut off, or like either literally or metaphorically.
And many times, at least in my experience, in my conversations, they don't recognize that there could be an external factor. They don't really connect that, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's always around this time, or maybe it's not just inside. Yeah. Maybe there are outside things.
Well, so it's so interesting, because like 2 weeks ago, I was feeling this feeling like in a big, heavy, luggy way. And side by side with that, I've just been having this feeling of like wanting to move more, like not the working out that I do. That feels very deliberate. And like I go and I don't know, I'm making like a very serious face with that. I wanted something that was more like movement oriented, almost like a dance class, but not a dance class. And so, some people might be familiar with Nia. It's just a movement dance thingy and like more expressive movement kind of thing. And I thought maybe that's what I need. I'll go try it out. And it was just kind of a random throw spaghetti to the wall kind of thing one Saturday, probably 2 weeks ago. And interestingly, the woman leading the class was also an acupuncturist, and she talked about this very thing as like setting her intention for the class. Yeah, I mean, it was almost cosmic how like, oh, okay, guess this is exactly what I need.
That is interesting.
But here was her perspective. She said, because there's this David White quote. I don't know if I have, it sounds like I'm going on a tangent, but I'm not. It's just FYI. Well, actually, I'm going on a tangent, but it's relevant. So it's a relevant tangent.
Yes.
There's a poem by David White, and I'm going to completely bastardize it, but I'm like paraphrasing it. And I may have paraphrased it before, actually.
Christy, get ready to cite this in your notes.
Yeah, exactly. It's something like, when you feel lost in the forest, the trees know where you are. That's the concept. And that's how this moment of listening to her as an acupuncturist
I love that.
feels. And it's sometimes how I feel when clients feel like completely frenetic, and I can see like, this is how this part of your business is supposed to feel. Like, doesn't mean that you don't, not to invalidate how you're feeling, but just know that you're not lost. Like, it's just part of this part of the path or whatever. And that was the feeling she gave me in that moment. And here's what she said. She said, I'm an acupuncturist. I have people coming in all the time this time of year saying they're coming to me because they're depressed and they're blah, blah, blah. And she said, and as the kind of acupuncturist that I am, my version of it, she said, we always look to the outside also, not just what's happening inside, but literally the outside. And she says, look outside. It's not even bright, sunny, cold. It's dreary. It's drab. It's gray. It's like the earth right now is hibernating and going in and dying off. She's like, this is just what's happening. And so anyway, she said this whole class will be kind of like generating warmth from the inside. Like, and that's sort of the theme she used for the class. And it felt so grounding, so I love that you brought this up, because it's interesting to me that I think that feeling that a lot of people get this time of year creates such a sense of disconnection. And I love that your solution to it is literally connection, like finding people to meet with. And
I wasn't thinking about it. It makes sense. And I wish I could say that, of course, that's why I did it, because I was analyzing that.
I can say for certain that is not what you were. You're not much of a like belly button navel gazer.
I just realized that if I'm kind of down and withdrawing, I want to talk to people who I think are interesting and excited and just are cool people who have a different perspective on things. Oh, and by different perspective, I'm not talking politics. I'm just talking about who approach business in interesting ways. And so I find the conversations to be a spark for me. And I'm always happy when I'm leaving, because I can look back on an hour really well spent, and that kind of sustains me. So with that's kind of one of my solutions, and I found it works for me. But when you started talking about this, you said, okay, that's not how I approach it, but I want to talk about the origins, and you did talk about the origins. But how do you deal with it? So
this is a little bit of a new awareness for me that I feel this way in January. And part of it is, ties back to the Facebook memories thing. Like, you know how it says like on this day, blah, 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 blah,
which is really cool, by the way. I like that.
I do. I really enjoy like flipping back through it. I don't look at it every single day, but a lot of days it's a little bit of a ritual. I kind of look back through it, because for me, it's this interesting cross section, like from a data standpoint. You can look at longitudinal data, you can look at latitudinal data. Like, it's like, oh, here's a cross section of January 12th. And here's a cross section. Cross section might not be the right word, but whatever.
No, but
it's like, here's a look at January 12th over the years. And it's not like it was any given day. Like January 12th is always bad for me, or 15th. But I have noticed in this past couple of weeks that apparently I often am struggling with something in January. Like January is a darker transition. I don't even know the word for it, because it's not like it falls into one category, but I'm not sure I'd ever noticed that I have this kind of feeling in January where I'm a little bit, and it probably ties into back to our conversation of New Year's resolutions, why I'm not as New Year's resolution focused. To me, those big changes tend to start more like February-ish, like, because January tends to be this month of like reflection and taking stock and just kind of, I'm sitting here sort of my eyes are moving left and right. Like I'm just cautiously isn't the right word. I just kind of look around in January and say like, what's working, what's not. I'm often very cognizant of what's not working and what I need to deal with. And, that's not always an exciting thing, So to me, it's kind of a reorienting month.
Well, I think, and actually, I know I can feel it. You're going to roll your eyes at me when I say this, which by the way, this is another reason you might want to go to the poll and say, yeah, I do want to see the video of Jodi rolling her eyes at Eliot, because the origins of the names for the months goes back to what you were saying, because the January is named for the Roman god Janus, and Janus is the two-faced god.
God named Janus?
Yeah, not Janus.
Like Janus.
Janus from accounting. No, it's Janus.
Oh, that's much cooler.
Much cooler.
Sorry to all the Januses out there. That's nothing personal.
Janus is has two faces, one looking back and one looking forward. And so in January, it makes sense because part of you looks back and reflects, and part of you is taken with, well, there's this whole year. You're at the beginning of the year. It's really February where you've gotten rid of one and you're kind of marching forward. But
no, that makes.
But
I'm also shocked sometimes at what you think I will roll my eyes at, because I find that fascinating. For the record, there was no eye rolling to that. But because and this is where. For most of my life, I consider myself very much an extrovert, but especially as I've gotten older, I think I'm getting more and more in touch with my introverted side. When I am feeling the way I feel in January's, I don't have the desire to go connect with people because it takes more energy out of me sometimes.
So what do you do?
In different ways. It's what I was saying. I'm much more in a kind of introspective watching and assessing and kind of weighing.
Does that exacerbate the feeling of isolation, or is that how you kind of move your way through it?
I'm glad you asked that, because as you said that, I realized that what I said is not exactly accurate. I do reach out to people, but not a lot of them. Like it's interesting when you may not either, but when you were describing it, I was imagining you having this list of like 10, 15, 20, like a larger number of people that you're reaching out to.
I do. I set a lot of meetings that go from January through early March, but I really make a point of reaching out to a lot of people.
So I reach out to people, but a small number of like tightly curated, because it comes back to what I was saying. When you do that, it fills your tank. Yes. And if I have a ton of people, it drains my tank. But I absolutely, if I didn't reach out to anybody, I would be a mess.
Okay.
I definitely reach out and connect with people who fill my tank. But it's in a more kind of like intimate circle, kind of not 15, 20. It's probably like 3, 4, 8 maybe people that I try to spend some time with, because they make me feel grounded. They fill up my tank. There's like a nourishment thing. That's it. I like in this January in particular, more than previous Januaries, probably because I'm focusing on it. I'm in a very like nourishing kind of like, what do I need kind of from a nourishment standpoint? And it's like people that fill my tank, good, healthy food that's like tasty and good for me, as opposed to like junk food, which is tasty but not good for me. And then there's like the hardcore, I'm trying to get into the lower weight class, good for me but might not be tasty. Like I'm trying to find that Venn diagram of in-betweenness. And the same with exercise. Like that's why I wanted the movement and to sort of balance out the intensity of the like I'm training for a competition. I want physical exercise that also feels, it's probably like a yin yang thing. Like I'm balancing out the yins and yangs.
But I like the concept when you said nourishment. I like the concept of nourishment because you find it in different ways. So for example, one of the people that I was having coffee with, she said that she makes it a point around this time of year to just do something that's unusual for her. So for me, at one point, a couple of years ago, that was taking improv lessons.
Right.
But whether it's it's doing one of these indoor skydiving things that have popped up, or it could be taking clarinet lessons or doing a new course, whatever it is. But some source of renewal. I have found in my conversations, because I do reach out to a lot of people and I do have these meetings, and this is a topic of conversation. What do you do? Or do you feel it at all? Some people, January is no different from July and it's fine and all that stuff. But to the people that feel it, I find that the consistent theme that runs through it, their way of coping, comes back to what you labeled, and I think just so aptly so, as nourishment. They find their own nourishment, but they are proactive in finding it.
Yeah. And what it's interesting to me because for many years, I mean, probably the past 15 years, that has often for me looked like adding something. I think if a big theme for me in what I do is like, I want a big full life. So, like I do this podcast and I sing in a band and I trained for that competition. Like I'm always adding things that kind of stretch my boundaries. And interestingly, this year I have this, it feels like right now what would be nourishing is I need to be doing like less. It's not an adding something. It's like, where do I want to sink in more? Like, where do I want to go deeper into one thing?
Well,
and
you
maybe
are
let
adding.
some other things drifting
I think
off.
you're adding depth.
Oh, I love that. I love that because it just like swooshes away any kind of like fear or resistance or because I still, even though it feels like the right thing, I still have that tiny little bit of like, but you're missing out, or like you won't get to do this. Like there's a little bit of an attachment there. So like still feeling like you're adding depth versus needing to. Because here's the interesting thing. When I was feeling this way in early January, the word that kept coming back to me was this particular year. It feels like I've been chasing a bunch of things. Like it's not quite the right word, but that's the closest I've been able to come up with, where it had this energy of like, now you really wish you had a video right now. You need a video because I was just making some really weird faces and hand gestures. But that probably describes it better than the word chasing. And that's not the energy I want right now. So I think the interesting thing about January for me is, and probably the reason I don't go talk to a bunch of people is January for me is often a very like unarticulatable kind of month. And if I'm hanging out with somebody, they're going to, that I already know and care about, they're going to want to understand and I can't put words on it right now. It's like I loved what you said. It's sort of, I'm looking back, I'm looking forward, and come later January into February, I often know what my path looks like. And then I can like put it into practice. But
no, and that makes sense. The sense of alarm I had was we're doing a podcast and you were talking about January being unarticulatable. And I just thought, well, then we have nothing to talk about.
No. Well, actually, God, we could do a whole episode just on that. I think I can put a bunch of words on it. But it makes sense. Well, I can put a bunch of words on it. Can I do it in a way that I will be understood is unlikely. And that is a topic that I think frankly warrants a whole other episode, is the communicate it in a way you're understood, and actually how to communicate with somebody so that you understand them, because there's something really powerful. It's just a word, being understood, but it is at the crux of some really profound things I've been thinking about a lot lately. So that's the part, like I could put a bunch of words on it, but I don't even know if they're quite the right words. And so the chances that I will actually be understood is pretty slim because I can't even articulate it. And therefore that feels kind of like a waste of my time.
Well, that's several podcasts. I mean, even in management, the stark and real difference between message given and message received is often the difference between success and failure, however you define success and however you perceive failure.
Oh, we both have but okay,
no,
you first.
Ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. So it's interesting. The whole time we've been talking about this, we've been talking about it from a very internalized personal standpoint, but at least 8 different times, and I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to take us too off track, but every single word we said applies to businesses as well. I think that there's this,
without question,
that this place, and depending on the type of business, that may not always be January, to be fair, because of the seasonality of things. But those pauses in the seasons, I guess, of a business where, you're sort of looking forward, you're looking back, like where is their need for nourishment and balance? All those things apply. And we didn't take much time to get into it deeply, but I think those are all there pretty distinctly.
No, and I guess that's what it is. For me, it's just a conscious effort to find vibrancy in the low places.
Yeah. Wow. That might have to be the title.
It may be. So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us.
Which
is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jodi Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.